But windy weather, in spite of its using him so roughly, was, after all, a sort of holiday for Toby. That's the fact. He didn't seem to wait so long for a sixpence in the wind as at other times. The having to fight with that boisterous element took off his attention and quite freshened him up when he was getting hungry and low spirited. A hard frost, too, or a fall of snow was an event, and it seemed to do him good, somehow or other. It would have been hard to say in what respect, though, Toby. So, wind and frost and snow, and perhaps a good stiff storm of hail, were Toby Veck's red letter days. Wet weather was the worst. The cold, the damp, clammy weather that wrapped him up like a moist greatcoat. The only kind of greatcoat Toby owned or could have added to his comfort by dispensing with. Wet days when the rain came slowly, thickly, obstinately down, when the street's throat, like his own, was choked with mist, when smoking umbrellas passed and repassed, spinning round and round like so many teetotums as they knocked against each other on the crowded footway, throwing out a little whirlpool of uncomfortable sprinklings. When gutters brawled and waterspouts were full and noisy, when the wet from the projecting stones and ledges of the church fell drip, drip, drip on Toby, making the wisp of straw on which he stood mere mud. In no time. Those were the days that tried him. Then indeed you might see Toby looking anxiously out from his shelter in an angle of the church wall, such a meagre shelter that in summer time it never cast a shadow thicker than a good-sized walking stick upon the sunny pavement, with a disconsolate and lengthened face. But coming out a minute afterwards to warm himself by exercise and trotting up and down some dozen times, he would brighten even then and go back more brightly to his niche. They call him Trotty from his pace, which meant speed if it didn't make it. He could have walked faster perhaps, most likely, but rob of his trot, and Toby would have taken to his bed and died. It bespattered him with mud in dirty weather. It cost him a world of trouble. He could have walked with infinitely greater ease, but that was one reason for his clinging to it so tenaciously. A weak, small, spare old man, he was a very Hercules, this Toby, in his good intentions. He loved to earn his money. He delighted to believe. Toby was very poor and couldn't well afford to part with the delight that he was worth his salt. With a shilling or an 18-penny message or small parcel in hand, his courage always high rose higher. As he trotted on, he would call out to fast postmen ahead of him to get out of the way, devoutly believing that in the natural course of things he must inevitably overtake and run them down, and he had perfect faith, not often tested, in his being able to carry anything that man could lift. Thus, even when he came out of his nook to warm himself on a wet day, Toby trotted, making with his leaky shoes a crooked line of slushy footprints in the mire, and blowing on his chilly hands and rubbing them against each other, poorly defended from the searching cold by threadbare mufflers of grey worsted, with a private apartment only for the thumb and a common room or tab for the rest of the fingers. Toby, with his knees bent and his cane beneath his arm, still trotted, falling out into the road to look up at the belfry when the chimes resounded. Toby trotted still. He made this last excursion several times a day, for they were company to him. And when he heard their voices, he had an interest in glancing at their lodging place and thinking how they were moved, and what hammers beat upon them. Perhaps he was the more curious about these bells, because there were points of resemblance between themselves and him. They hung there in all weathers, with the wind and rain driving in upon them, facing only the outsides of all those houses, never getting any nearer the blazing fires that gleamed and shone upon the windows, or came puffing out of the chimney tops, and incapable of participation in any of the good things that were constantly being handed through the street doors and the area railings to prodigious cooks. Faces came and went at many windows, sometimes pretty faces, youthful faces, pleasant faces, sometimes the reverse. But Toby knew no more, though he often speculated on these trifles, standing idle in the streets, whence they came, or where they went, or whether, when the lips moved, one kind word was said of him in all the year, then did the chimes themselves. Toby was not a casuist, that he knew of, at least. I don't mean to say that when he began to take to the bells and to knit up his first rough acquaintance with them into something of a closer and more delicate woof, he passed through these considerations one by one, or held any formal review or great field day in his thoughts. But what I mean to say and do say is that as the functions of Toby's body, his digestive organs, for example, did of their own cunning, and by a great many operations of which he was altogether ignorant, and the knowledge of which would have astonished him very much, arrive at a certain end. So his mental faculties, without his privity or concurrence, set all these wheels and springs in motion, with 1,000 others, when they worked to bring about his liking for the bells. And though I had said his love, I would not have recalled the word, though it would scarcely have expressed his complicated feeling. For, being but a simple man, he invested them with a strange and solemn character. They were so mysterious, often heard and never seen, so high up, so far off, so full of such a deep, strong melody, that he regarded them with a species of awe. Sometimes when he looked up at the dark arched windows in the tower, he half expected to be beckoned to by something which was not a bell, and yet was what he had heard so often sounding the chimes. For all this, Toby scouted with indignation a certain flying rumor that the chimes were haunted, as implying the possibility of their being connected with any evil thing. In short, they were very often in his ears, very often in his thoughts, but always in his good opinion. And he very often got such a crick in his neck by staring with his mouth wide open at the steeple where they hung, that he was fain to take an extra trot or two afterwards to cure it. The very thing he was in the act of doing one cold day when the last drowsy sound of 12 o'clock just struck was humming like a melodious monster of a bee, and not by any means a busy bee, all through the steeple. "Dinner time, eh?" said Toby, trotting up and down before the church. Ah! Toby's nose was very red, and his eyelids were very red, and he winked very much, and his shoulders were very near his ears, and his legs were very stiff, and altogether he was evidently a long way upon the frosty side of cool. "Dinner time, eh?" repeated Toby, using his right hand muffler like an infantine boxing glove and punishing his chest for being cold. He took a silent trot, and after that, for a minute or two, "There's nothing," said Toby, breaking forth afresh, but here he stopped short in his trot, and with a face of great interest and some alarm. He felt his nose carefully all the way up. It was but a little way, not being much of a nose, and he had soon finished. "I thought it was gone," said Toby, trotting off again. "It's all right, however. I'm sure I couldn't blame it if it was to go. It has a precious hard service of it in the bitter weather. Precious little to look forward to. I don't take snuff myself. It's a good deal tried, poor creature, at the best of times, for when it does get hold of a pleasant whiff or so, it's generally from somebody else's dinner or coming home from the baker's."